Gracias. I'm Stefan Bott. I'm presenting today. Like, the idea was to present a corpus that we created. This was a paper we had in LREC, so we presented it there. But I think it's good to introduce a little bit of the project itself, because there's embedded in a larger setting, and I also want to present a little bit, like just 2 slides or 4 slides, yeah, for what we did with the corpus. So, first of all, this is collaboration, like the original paper done by 5 persons. You may recognize one of these persons here, which is Horacio.
Oh, wow.
I just took the pictures of internet, so it's Verena Riegler, who is working at Capito AI, Horacio, and Modena, who is working at Plena Inclusión Madrid. And I will tell you a little bit about this distribution of work in a second. And Nuran Kala, who works at University of Leeds. Okay, so I will come back to the division of labor in a while. So this is the index. I will skip. So I think the best point is to start with is the need for linguistic accessibility and especially in democracy. So democratic deliberation, well, this is the process of participating in a democracy, organizing discussions, exchange of ideas, which is in some way leading to a decision making. So democratic deliberation is a crucial case for inclusion, because first of all, because a lot of people are not included. And the reasons are that for any decision which has to be taken, you need a lot of information. You need, like, really a high quantity of information, and the democratic deliberation is complex in itself. But then, on the other hand, we have the rights of all citizens to participate. So this is recognized in different legal frameworks. For example, the UN Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities recognizes the right to have information presented in an easy-to-read format, which is, I think, not specific. You may know this. Like, if it is specific in one specific format of easy text or not, I think it's not. And then we also have the European Accessibility Act, which also specifies, but it states that you have to present information, or crucial information has to be given in a format which is easy to understand, so everybody can access it. So this is focused on people with disabilities, but it's not exclusively for people with disabilities. And well, on the one hand, we have the people, the participants, and we have the right for all of the participants, or for all of the citizens to participate. But we also have input which comes from these persons, and this is a valuable input in many cases for informing the decisions, because if people can participate, they can state what problems they have and how they think that certain decisions will affect them. And this is an input ideally should be used in the democratic process. Okay. So first of all, there is a difference between 2 kinds of accessibility. So first of all, you have to have information accessible in a physical sense. We know all of this, so any call or any decision has to be made public, so that there is a place you can go and you can access this information, you can read it, and you have the information, okay? So this might be, for example, what the function of el boletín oficial del Estado de España, so state bulletins, so places where announcements are made. But then you have all kinds of other information which has to be made public. So you can go to a web page, or you can go to a search engine and look for this information and can look it up. But then you have this other kind of accessibility, which is not this physical accessibility. And you may all know this. Sometimes the information is given in a language which is really difficult to understand. So I've given the example of the Boletín Oficial del Estado. And if you have ever used it, if you have ever had to look for a call, for a grant or so, you know that it's really written in a very difficult way. So even people like us, with a certain education, we have problems reading this and getting all the information out of it. So sometimes we have to read it twice, we have to read it very carefully, we have to underline, we have to cross-check and so on. And sometimes this is even intentionally used in some contracts, the typical fine print. So sometimes things are formulated in a way that it's there, but people cannot actually understand it. So, okay, you can sneak in some conditions. So, I mean, this is only to tell you that sometimes the users of somewhat simplified language, which may be simplified to still a very difficult level, but easier than the original one. So sometimes the users may even ask, okay? The affected populations we know are, we have been thinking a lot of people with cognitive disabilities. You also have this cast into these legal frameworks like the Accessibility Act. So there's a specific mention for people with disabilities, but it also may affect migrants. It may affect non-permanent residents, which are also a kind of migrant, older adults. And you see that these groups, they have some things in common, but then they have differences among themselves, and not all of these groups are homogeneous groups. So you may have different needs for simplification. Some people, they just may not know certain words, and then there are people who cannot parse very long sentences. So it's if you are very proficient in your own language, you probably have no problem of parsing long sentences, but you may have problems with special terms, vocabulary, and so on. And this is in terms of who it is for. And then we have different solutions for text simplification. So the classical approach is to have manual simplification, which involves a person simplifying this. So this is a intralingual translator who translates from, let's say, standard language to a specific variant of the language. And you have different frameworks for these recommendations. So one framework is easy to read, which is a very specific set of instructions how this language should be presented. So avoid long sentences, one sentence should only contain one main idea. And for example, easy to read is more oriented towards people with disabilities. Then there is another framework which is easy language, which is like more general, plain English. so on. So this is what I said before, that, for example, it's often in the frameworks, in the legal frameworks, or in the, they mention simplified language, but they do not specify which kind of simplification, which kind of framework. And this can also make a difference, okay? It can make a difference in that it's intended for people with actual disabilities, or it's just intended for a general public, but a general public which may not have a very high level of education or a lot of reading experience. Okay, the problem is with manual simplification, it causes a high cost, but it's also high quality because you have professionals who are trained in this, so they will give higher output. And then a little bit parallel to the high costs, it's also, you also have a problem that you can only simplify a certain volume of text at a given time. So you're necessarily restricted to the most important documents. And yeah, that's a serious limitation. Nevertheless, you find more and more that these simplified versions are provided. You can even see in many countries that there are news for people, news in simple language, or government documents are presented in formularios. Forms. And okay, so as opposed to manual simplification, you have the possibility of automatic simplification. So this is an emerging technology which has the high potential for doing a lot of volume of simplification. You can potentially achieve a high quality, but at the moment it's still quite lower than the manual simplification, and you do not have the limitation of text volume. So you can just, at any time, theoretically, you have a new document, you can just simplify it and have the two versions at the same moment. Okay, I'm saying this is an emerging technology. It's something like what happened, well, it's what we think, it's something that that's happening, what has happened to automatic translation. So think back about 20 years, you had automatic translators, but they still had a lot of flaws. So you could translate a document, you could get the general idea, but you could also see a lot of errors. And I think at the moment for simplification, we are a little bit in such a moment. We can produce volumes of text, and usually they are helpful, but you still see a lot of errors there. And so it's not 100% reliable, but we also think that it's going to be on the same road like automatic translation, that eventually we will get there. And just as a point of comparison, like, I don't know, 15 years ago when we started working on this, I mean, it was not working in a way that you could give an automatically simplified text to an end user, because the errors that just outweighed way too much the benefits you could get from them. So we've come a long way in this sense. Okay, I think this is a good moment to introduce the IDEM project, the general framework. So this is a quite big project. It's IDEM means innovative and inclusive democratic spaces for deliberation and participation. It's an EU Horizon framework project. It has 12 partners. We have 4 use cases, 3 of which were the original ones. Then we had one for English, which was coming a little bit later. So we you will see that this also influences a little bit. And we have use cases with real users in 4 countries or regions. So we have in Spain and in Catalonia, and also in Italy and in Malta. And yeah, we have a website, so this is our website here. So the different branches of IDEM is, okay, we have IDEM, the project in the center, but then we have, I would say, 4 pillars within the project. So we have people working on the theoretical foundations, just to mention it for completeness. So people who look at the theory of democratic deliberation, how you organize those processes, how you include people, and so on. Then we have, what we have here, a work package on language complexity and also language data, which overlaps a little bit with technology itself. Then we have human language technology, which is our group, but also the group in Leeds. And then finally, we have the user engagement and the use cases. And so the workflow is a little bit, you know, like in a clockwork fashion. So, but there are interactions between all of these packages. And finally, we have all of these partners assigned to the different parts of the project. And most interesting is like the parts here on the left bottom corner, which are NGOs, and they are doing the use cases. So they are piloting, so they organize sessions with real users. Okay, so for today, we are not concerned with theoretical foundations. We are only marginally concerned about the use cases. So mainly, we are concerned about technology and a little bit also about language complexity. So within this group, we have we create a classifier for difficulty. So classifier which says, okay, this sentence is difficult, so you should simplify it, or it's not difficult, so there is no need to simplify it. Then there is also a classifier for the reason of difficulty. So this would be for example, this sentence is difficult because there are difficult words in it, or this sentence is difficult because there are several ideas which are expressed within the same sentence, so you should split the sentence and so on. And then we also have the IDEM mobile app, which is it's an app for your phone. And this is actually used within the use cases. And then there is what I'm going to talk about today, or, well, this is more what represents us, the part of automatic text simplification. So we created a simplifier which we call the Starling simplifier. And this connects to the mobile app, and it's used in the use cases. And actually, I don't have it here on my slide, and I just realized I should have. We have also this part of, we have the part of data creation, which is what I'm going to talk about next, and what is the center. So sorry for not doing this. So this is an example of the IDEM app, just to have an image here. So you can, this is a mobile app, you can enter text, you can also scan text, you can paste text, but you can also, it's integrated with IDEM, which is a platform for public deliberation. So there is, for example, IDEM Barcelona, there is IDEM Bologna, they they have platforms. They use the same software to create platforms for public deliberations, so people can comment, people can open topics, or the organizer of topics can open topics and people can comment on them and so on. So you can take text from there, you can use them directly in the app, and then in this field here you would get the simplification. Just use the existing screenshots and there is no simplification, but you have to imagine that it's there. Okay. So the title of the talk was actually about, so I was going to talk about a corpus we created. So I'm starting now with the part of the corpus. Okay. So the motivation, why do we produce new data? Why do we compile a new corpus to begin with? We found, well, we know that there is a data bottleneck for automatic text simplification. So especially there are quite some data sets for English, but for lower resource languages like Spanish or for Italian, there are considerably less data sets. For Catalan sentence simplification, there was none. So we had to create one because there was no data available. And even for languages like English, where you have quite a lot of resources, not all of these resources are actually high quality resources. So you have resources which are created by crowdfunding. So crowd workers would produce some simplification, but they have an incentive to do this quickly because they get paid by every unit they finish. And you can imagine that people are not very motivated to spend a long time on each of the units. So it's not the best resources. Then you have a lot of resources which are not actually parallel, but they are comparable. So alignment, for example, a very important resource is the simple English Wikipedia, which was aligned to the English Wikipedia, but then you do not always get a one-to-one correspondence between the content of two sentences which are aligned. So one sentence in one version may contain more information than the other, and so on. So the baseline, like the bottom line of this, is that it's really hard to get high quality resources, even in high resource languages like English, or basically the one high resource language is English, and then German and Swedish. You have some more resources, but so the high quality of the data is important for text simplification because, well, this is when we do machine learning, this is what the machine learns from. So when you have poor data, it will learn poor simplification strategies. So, for example, we know that large language models are inherently capable of simplifying. I don't know if you all know about large language models. So large language models are those models of, for example, GPT, which is a very well-known large language model, but then there are, of course, others. There are commercial models where you have to pay for and which are hosted on a server and you cannot touch them, so you cannot change them. But then there are also language models which are open, so you can run them on your own server. You can change the internal parameters, so you can do fine-tuning on them and so on. So, and what most people understand today as large language models are actually one part or one specific type of models which are generative models, which, like, ChatGPT, you can give them a prompt and say, okay, please give me a simplification of the following sentence, and then it will respond, and in most of the cases, it will give you a simplified version of your input sentence. Okay, so these large language models, they have a very high generative capacity, so they are very good at producing language. They are very good at producing language output which is grammatically correct, because they know very well what a grammatical sentence looks like, but they are not specialized, so they may be prompted for simplifying something, and they will give you an answer, and it will probably be a simplified sentence, but they are not specialists in that. So if we want to create like a more specialized model, we have to fine-tune them. This is taking the model and give it additional training data, and so changing the weights of the model, the parameters a little bit, so it becomes more specialized to this specific task. And of course, if you want to do this fine-tuning, you first need data, and as this is, for example, we had for Catalan, we did not have any data, and the better the data you have, the better you can teach it. So, and even if you do not want to do fine-tuning, still you need, if you want to know how good your system does with an automized evaluation, you need data which represents these simplifications in order to have your evaluation system. So to make it for this evaluation system possible to give you a number of how good your simplification is actually done. Okay? So the data is really, really important. And as I said, for Catalan, we didn't. For Spanish, we have several data sets, but they are not very big. And they are not in the domain that we wanted to have it, which is the domain of democratic deliberation. So in the beginning, we thought about initial requirements. So we wanted to have a cross-lingual method. So, the same methodology should be applied to all of the languages. It should be high-quality data. So simplification would ideally be produced by trained human experts, by real easy-to-read translators. We wanted to have the simplification being produced on a well-defined list of simplification criteria. So, for example, there is, in Spanish, there is UNES standard for easy to read, and it gives you like all of the rules, like all of the like all of the recommendations. You would find a rule like, avoid difficult words and avoid long sentences. And of course, it's the formulation is a little bit more specific. And then we also wanted that the translators would also annotate which of these rules they had actually applied in order to produce this simplified version. Okay, so we come to design. What we had is an existing guideline. We had a project partner, Capito, which had their own guidelines, which are based on easy to read. They are mostly compliant to standard easy to read with a little bit of variation, but they only had it disponible They only had it for Spanish and Italian, so and for Catalan it didn't exist. So first of all, they had to create it for Catalan. And then what proved to be a little bit of a problem is that for the different guidelines, for the different languages, the guidelines were a little bit different. So because they also took into account already existing recommendation for each language. So for example, for Spanish, I think they already use the UNE standard. And for German, there is another standard, which is also known as the DIN standard, and so on. So this is a little bit, this messed a little bit with this idea of having the same, exact same set of rules for each of the languages. But then, of course, there are also linguistic differences between languages, which also makes it a little bit more complicated. So, for example, for Catalan, you had rules for pronoms febles, and I mean, this is only for Catalan, so there is no pronoms febles in Spanish. Italian, I think there are, but less than in Catalan. So, okay, this was a little bit of a limitation. And, but as far as we, in terms of the text we collected for this corpus, so the source text, we tried to make a very similar selection. So you have in all of the languages a great percentage of one thing is the topics, and the other thing is the type of source. So we had topics, for example, like sustainability and participation, social policy, and we try to have different. We try to have similar topics in all of these languages. And in terms of text sources, we also try to have like similar amounts of types of sources for the different languages. So, for example, you had a lot of informative text, you had political and ideological articles, institutional, legal documents, etc., etc. You also had news articles, of course. So there's also quite some variety in the sources, but this represents also the variety of documents that you can find in public deliberations. So for example, you have direct participations in a discussion, you have documents with proposals, and so on. Okay, so as for producing the simplified version, this was done by trained simplification translators. The people from Capito, they had already established contacts to certain organizations, so they could recruit from there. So they could recruit people which they already knew, and they knew they were good translators, and they knew the guidelines. While doing the simplifications, we had to do it in a very specific, well, in a somewhat specific way, because sometimes people, when they produce, when the translators, they produce simplifications, they tend to rewrite the text, and this can also lead to a little bit of a reordering of the information within a paragraph. And we, for our purposes, because we wanted to use it for training of sentence simplification, we had the requirement that there would be strictly a line between sentence and sentence. So we obliged them to like always take one sentence and give exactly not one sentence as an output, but one unit, which could consist of several sentences. And actually, this happens a lot. Yeah, you had one-to-many relations. You could even have many-to-one relations, which were not I don't think we even had them. Okay, and another limitation which we had, because this is a costly process, that we could translate each of the documents only by one translator. So it would have been a lot better to have more translations for each input sentence, but yeah, that's a problem of money. And to guarantee a consistent quality, they had contacts between the translators, and they did some cross checks, and so they made sure that they were applying the same rules in the same way. Okay? So when we created the corpus for each of the sentences, we had like first a text idea, we had identifiers for the sentences, and then we have the original and the simplified sentences. And as I said before, we wanted to have annotations, so the translators wrote down which rules they use for each of the simplification. And of course, you get the alignment between each document and the alignment between sentence within the document. This is something else. This is also, I would say something about this Mertrans share task. It's still pending to be published, but I think we will publish it as soon as we can, because we need some, like maybe 2 days to organize a little bit and clean up and put it on a GitHub repository. And the text sets will be included, and the original simplification guidelines, which were produced within the project, they will also be included. The other guidelines, they are intellectual property of Capito, so we cannot include them, but at least we will have the text set, and it will be usable both for using the simplifications, but it will also be usable if you want to study or train on the annotations for each sentence of which type of simplification has been performed. Okay, just give some statistics. This is the size. So we have around 350 original sentences for each of each of the languages, which varies a little bit. And then you see this translates to usually more than one unit per sentence. So you can see here in Spanish you have quite a lot of simplified sentences per input sentence. Catalan you have less. There were some reasons for that, and in Italian is somewhere in between. And then you also have the count for words. And here we can see a little bit what the categories were. So most of the text came from informative text, and then you had a little bit of a variation of how many documents you had for the other categories, but we tried to have this as similar as possible over the languages. Oh yeah, and then you may have noticed in the beginning I said we had 4 languages, including English, and there is no English part of the language of this corpus, because English came in as an additional use case after we had run the project for about a year. So it was not in the original design. So it would have been nice to have also English, but we couldn't include it. Okay, and then we have since we have these annotations, we can also count which type of simplification operations were the most frequent one. So you can see there is a little bit of a variation across languages. For example, in Spanish, the most frequent category was the use of paragraph breaks or line breaks to separate ideas into different sentences. So this is, I think, very specific to easy to read. So sometimes there's a recommendation that if you have a long sentence and you can identify the boundaries where a new idea begins, then you would not end the sentence, but you would put a new line in that. So one sentence can be split over different lines, which makes it easier to read. And for example, in Catalan, the annotate, the translators, they were not really very used to this type of things, so they didn't produce it, and we are trying to introduce it now. So, for example, you have a variation there, but you see that a lot of recommendations are about frequent or common lexical items. So you can see here frequent common verbs, frequent adverbs, and so on. So if you are interested in this, and you want to look at the list, I can give you the slides. And yeah, this is finally for Italian. Again, the first most frequent category is the use of commonly used verbs. Also the use of periods or commas to separate sentences with multiple ideas, which is a little bit similar to introducing these new lines. Actually, in Italian, they also introduced new lines for separate parts of the sentence. And okay, this is like the first use we made of the corpus to look actually which simplification operations were the most frequent ones. And it's already interesting in itself. Okay, further uses we had. So I'm coming to the end. So first of all, we wanted to use it internally for us. So at the moment we have a simplifier. We created one, which is at the moment it's based on generative large language models. So we just do prompting at the moment, which means we do not need this data as training data, but we need it for evaluation of the data. So you can run automatic measures of the metrics. So we can have an idea how good the system is. We did no fine tuning so far, but we would like to do it if you have the time to do so. Okay, and this is also the system that we used for the use cases. So it was used as a backend for the mobile application, and yeah, and just what I said. In future uses, we would like to use it for fine tuning. And remember that at the beginning I mentioned that we have a classifier which is actually developed by our partners in Leeds. We would like to integrate this. The simplifier, so we would say, for example, okay, we have the sentence, and here in the sentence you have a problem of type X. So, for example, it's a very long sentence, and you should split it, and then instruct the system directly to perform these types of operations. Okay, so here is a little bit of a table of comparison, which is probably you're not very familiar with. We have the SARI score, which is a typical metric for text simplification, and Like the only thing you can see at the moment is we have different models, and when you see at the 1B, 2B, this means 1 billion parameters, or 9B is 9 billion parameters, so this is bigger models, and they tend to perform better. So this is something that we expected, but we could see, okay, like at least it's working. We can see that our automatic evaluation goes up when we use more sophisticated, bigger models. And another thing is we organized shared tasks for text simplification. It was called Mertrans, Multilingual Easy-to-Read Translation. It was done in IBERLEF, which is the Iberian Language Evaluation Forum, organized by the Zeppelin, the Spanish Society for Natural Language Processing, and we use specifically the IDEM corpus plus another data set for the evaluation. And we have these three metrics here, which, I mean, I don't want to go into what they mean. And this is a table which there was no way of getting it right in Google Sheets, so please excuse this. But here, actually, you can see, okay, you have, like here, this is the winner. It goes from first position, second position, so on. And you can see, okay, we have, for example, we have for Spanish, we have a SARI of 47 point something. And the good thing about this, having this data from this shared task, is that now we can go back to our values and we can say, okay, our best combination of the model with the system was 45 in terms of SARI. So you have, we know, okay, we are a little bit worse than the winner, but we are very close. So this is the reason why we need a corpus like this for doing these evaluations, because if we do not have them, we are kind of blind. I mean, you can look at the data, but it's not easy to see like the overview of all of the output, and of course it takes a lot of time, and you cannot, at each iteration, you cannot look always at the output again and again. So this was like the real reason and the big advantage of having this corpus. And yeah, that's basically it. So we produced this corpus with high quality. It's produced by professionals. We have our 3 languages. For Catalan, it was the first one. It's a sentence-aligned resource, and it's annotated with simplification operations, which tells us what the translation, what type of problems the translators actually fixed. And okay, these are the acknowledgements, and this is the thank you slide.
Bé, doncs, em sentiu?
Sí.
Jo et faré les preguntes en català, Stefan, si no et sap greu. Aviam, una de les primeres coses, com que veig que la Iri està connectada, en tot cas ella ja farà referència als recursos que ella va desenvolupar i que ha anat desenvolupant per si us pot fer servei o si ho heu consultat. Jo et volia fer preguntes sobre bàsicament, quan has parlat de la selecció de fonts, he vist que hi ha tota mena de textos. Jo em sento com a molt rebotada. No sé si em sentiu?
Sí.
Sí, et sentim, sí, Mercè.
Sentiu?
Sí.
Jo ara ho sento millor si em trec els cascos.
Veus?
Doncs ara et volia preguntar sobre la selecció de fonts. He vist que hi havia textos legislatius, articles de política, informes, tota mena de textos de premsa. Però després, quan ho has posat per llengües, m'ha semblat que no eren a tot arreu. Per exemple, en català no he vist premsa i en italià tampoc. Això no ho he controlat, que tots tinguessin una mica.
Sí, crec que aquesta taula està truncada. Jo crec que hi ha unes categories que són menys freqüents i que s'han quedat fora.
D'acord. Les altres preguntes... Ui, és que em sento dues vegades, no sé. Les altres preguntes, la primera té a veure amb m'ha semblat que deies que fèieu simplificació oració per oració.
Sí.
No paràgraf per paràgraf.
Sí.
No? I volia preguntar-te per què havíeu decidit això. Perquè tinc la sensació que a vegades hi ha paràgrafs en molts textos especialitzats que són redundants i sobre la mateixa idea i possiblement simplificar tot el paràgraf és una simplificació major que no pas fer frase per frase. I si de cas et faig les altres preguntes, si et sembla, i així ja callo. Les altres tenen a veure, les altres dues, amb les estadístiques que he mencionat. M'ha de veure per què en català la relació entre paraula-oració és poc de l'original a la simplificació. Baixava d'un 42% al 43%, em sembla. Les altres era molt més espectacular, el canvi. I si poguessis explicar a què et sembla que pot ser degut. I després les anotacions, que suposo que també té a veure amb el que has dit ara, que no surten totes, m'ha sorprès que 3 llengües romàniques que no siguin exactament o molt semblants. És a dir, només coincidien algunes. El català tenia algunes diferents de l'italià i l'espanyol i m'ha sorprès perquè no deixa de ser una llengua romànica. No res més. Gràcies.
Vale. Bueno, la primera pregunta era lo de no fer simplificació de text sencer i això té una raó tècnica perquè fer simplificació automàtica de segments més grans és més difícil. I vam provar una mica amb alguns models i tenen, quan els segments són més grans, més grossos, tenen una tendència de no donar una simplificació de tot el contingut. Semblen que s'obliden de què està al final. Pot ser que és un problema dels models que hem provat, perquè hem agafat models que siguin disponibles públicament i que podríem córrer nosaltres, no a través d'una API. Certament és un paradigma nou i relativament actiu de fer simplificació de textos sencers. Segurament seria bastant millor fer-ho així. Però com que teníem la necessitat de fer aquesta simplificació online al mateix temps quan ho feia l'usuari, ens obligava a tenir una infraestructura que podríem pagar, que podria córrer un model de llenguatge que hi cabia, que era com un model relativament petit, i amb això hem tirat per fer sentence simplification, que només era oració per oració. Després, a veure què havia... Sí, les fonts...
No, les estadístiques.
Sí, les estadístiques.
La relació word sentence que sortia en el català, que era molt poc diferent de l'original.
I hem vist que diferents grups d'anotadors, de simplificadors, han fet estratègies diferents. I també era que el capítol tenia contactes molt estrets amb equips que ja coneixien que podien fer simplificacions per espanyol i per italià. I per català havien de trobar un equip nou i pot ser que per això tenien traductors que no eren molt acostumats a fer aquestes separacions. I a més s'ha de dir que no són, les unitats que tenim allí no són oracions en el sentit clàssic, sinó que poden ser aquests segments quan una oració es trenca enmig per un salt de línia. Que no és necessàriament com una oració que termina amb un punt. Sí, això i ho vam notar i realment no ens va agradar i estem buscant maneres d'introduir aquests salts de línia ara a posteriori. Si ho podem fer, ho farem per tenir una mica més paral·lelitat entre les llengües. I l'últim era...
Ja me l'has contestat, perquè eren els equips diferents i...
I també les guidelines, les recomanacions també eren diferents per diferents llengües, que clarament és una limitació. També hi havia coses tan tontes com en una llengua posava evitar paraules poc freqüents i en una altra posava evitar verbs poc freqüents, evitar noms poc freqüents i, clar, això distorsiona i volem agrupar aquestes coses i agregar una mica els números. Bueno, són problemes que trobes quan fas les coses en un món real.
Sí. Moltes gràcies.
Vale. Algo, Can, sisplau.
Well, thank you for the presentation and for presenting this interesting focus. I come from machine translation evaluation background and Corpus preparation for machine translation, and I saw some parallels in the preparation of the Corpus and the way you evaluate. What I don't understand, and maybe you can help me with that, is what is the criteria for quality in simplification, especially you mentioned that you use easy-to-read translators to simplify. And did you have another layer of verification if these simplifications were high-quality simplification or not, or
yes,
you just assumed?
Yes. When they produced them, they did cross-checks across different translators, which is, of course, not the best way to do it, but it's a way you can do it without creating, without having to spend too much resources.
Yeah, really costly.
And then, the main quality guarantee was in that it was produced by professional translators. So we saw that they had different backgrounds, they would produce different types of translation, and this is also something that you would expect when you look at these recommendations. They are not very, very strict. They will always say something like, oh, avoid infrequent words, and then you have to interpret what infrequent word is, and also express only one idea, and it's not always clear what one idea is, and if you have to split a sentence into two or not. So there is certainly some variation. And then maybe if you come from the background of machine translation, okay, we also have the automatic metrics, and you have to say that they are not perfect by any means. It's like, you work with blur, and blur is not ideal. We also use blur, but now we have, we also have SARI, which is a metric which is similar to blur in that it also counts n-grams, but it counts n-grams in the traditional way, that it also says, okay, if there is n-grams of things which have been removed from the original in the translation, so you would also check if those things have been removed, and if some things have been added, it will also check if these have been added. And yeah, it's better than having nothing, but it will not check if the guidelines have been respected. And that should be our real check of, the criterion of quality. And unfortunately, it's very hard to do. And manual annotations are very hard. If you do things like, does this comply to recommendations, then you would need, again, specialized persons to do this.
Yeah.
So it's really tricky. We are doing now an end evaluation with end users, and they just look at the text and say, oh, this was, well, we could read this and we could understand this. So it's not very, very fine-grained, but at least it's done with people who, they represent the problem. I mean, they represent the problem of reading difficulties. So yeah, this is the best we can do. And certainly there is a lot of room for improvement.
Thank you very much for that slide.
So congratulations on your amazing work. As you know, I know very well the project because Horacio at the beginning invited me to be a part of the International Experts Committee, so I have the opportunity to attend different meetings. But I didn't know this part of the corpus and the resources, so congratulations. I have several questions. The first one about the process of cross-checking. So I think your question is done. And the other one related to the linguistic recommendations as Merced. So the third one is which was the criteria to choose the models, Salamandra, Tema, and Llama?
Okay. So first of all, we just wanted to have a variation in having different models and have different sizes. So Llama, okay, this is like Llama and Gemma, they are very frequent, so we wanted to have them because they are very frequent. They also have good multilingual capacities. Salamandra was especially promising because it represents Romance languages. I mean, it's part of this initiative of funded by the government of creating like a national AI system, and it's done here at Barcelona Supercomputing Center. So I think it is the best one, at least in theory, which best represents Catalan. So then in the end, it didn't really work out that well. So we expected that it would work better on Catalan. It probably didn't work much better than Llama. So, and then we used Olmo because it was like a very open. I mean, this is not really a hard decision criteria, but it's a very open initiative. So, and then also, once you have set up your pipeline, you also try to put in more models which work with your pipeline without having to change too much. So.
Right. Another question is how did you build the baseline of the surface?
Oh, okay. Here we have the creator of baseline 1 and creator of baseline 2. So baseline 2 was basically our system with a small model.
Okay.
So and he created a little bit more sophisticated model.
So the model is good, but the prompt is quite simple. Probably does not benchmark.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay.
But it's almost the same.
Yeah, and it's a little bit bigger model, and it was quite strong actually. So many systems could not outperform it.
Okay, great. And finally, in which platform is going to be the Corpus available?
I think we will publish it as a GitHub repository, because I think this is, so I'm feeling a little bit ashamed because I presented it like 5 weeks ago, and I told everyone, yeah, we are going to publish it like next week or 2 weeks before, but we didn't have the time because it's not really a big thing, and you need like a day or two for some cleanup.
There is a simpler version already in the shared task. There is a version that
Oh, yeah.
download. The original, it's not a criteria because the corpus is much more sophisticated, but you can at least the original and the human simplification you can so it's available. But then more of a richer corpus. We still need.
Yeah, so we are also planning to have like a second, like a version 2.0, because there are some things we wanted to fix if we can, if we're not running out of time. So one of the things is the missing line breaks in Catalan, but then also we saw that sometimes yeah, sorry, we are over time, so yeah.
Thank you very much, and congratulations.
Tenim més qüestions. La Núria Bel, I have a question too, and I was here before Núria Bel, okay?
Sorry, it's me or you?
It's my turn and then you.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know a lot about simplification, okay? At the beginning of your presentation, you talked about classification of reasons for difficulty and then classification of difficulty. And it were two different things.
Yes.
I imagine that the second one was in the level of difficulty.
Yeah, it's a label of.
Oh, that's okay. Intuitively.
Yeah, it's the label for difficulty. Yeah, it's a label which we give for the reason. So.
And how does it impact to the model? I mean, you go to the more important ones than to the.
No, it wouldn't. So we have this classifier. We had it for some time, but it was not really working too good, and I think there are some recent improvements. So when we have a sentence which comes in, and then we run the classifier on it, so it will tell us, okay, this sentence is difficult because there is a difficult verb in it, and this sentence is difficult because it has more than one main idea. And so the first thing that we want to try is. At the moment, we do just a prompt. We explain the system. Please give a simplified version of this sentence, and so on. So what we can do now is add some additional instruction to this and say, okay, please turn this sentence into several smaller sentences, and please replace difficult verbs by simple verbs. And hopefully, you never know, but hopefully this will give an improvement. Then the next thing is you can also give the system examples of simplification which exemplify exactly this type of simplification. So this should also improve. And then we have an idea of doing fine-tuning and use the labels for the difficulty as part of the input data for the fine-tuning. And then when you do the inference, when you create the simplification, you would also run the classifier and then ask the system, produce me the simplification. And in addition, I give you, as a help, I give you this label. So it takes an informed decision on how it will produce the simplification.
But this is more about the reason of difficulty?
Yeah, this is
the level.
Oh, well, the level of difficulty is simply if the sentence is not difficult, then we do not simplify it.
Huh?
Because you have, I mean, this is something very specific. We found that a lot of very, very small segments like headlines or so, they were simplified in a very, very bad manner by the system.
Okay.
Especially, we had like one example where the headline just said IDEM project, and then the system would go on. The IDEM project is a project about ecology, and it's about diversity of plants and whatever, and it was like such a paragraph with such a small input, and this was especially happening with very, very short inputs, and so we do not run the risk for this. But also, I mean, if you do not need any, you do not need to fix anything which is not broken, so you do not run the risk, and you just pass it on.
Okay, thank you. Núria, sisplau.
Okay, thank you. Okay, wanted to switch this up. Okay, thank you, Stefan. Very interesting. I already knew a bit the project, but you got me a much better picture. I am a bit surprised about how, well, no, you said that language models inherently simplify text. What do you mean? That they have instructed? Are you working with instructed versions or with plain versions?
No, it's just that they have an inherent capability of doing this. Yeah. So when you program doing this, you will get an answer, and you get a simplified answer. So they can perform the task if you ask them to do it.
Oh, and you train them to do it. So you need to provide data where there is, you have the task, the input, and the targets.
You can do zero-shot prompting, and they will produce an output.
But it means that it has been instructed already, or aligned.
Somewhere
not that
have learned it from, and you never know where it learned it from. That's the thing.
Well. Maybe one day we can discuss that. And the other question would be that these models, the commercial ones, these products, I would say more than models, because they are products with many different components. Normally, they have different parameters or penalties that are really, that could be against the task of simplification. There is this frequency penalty that avoids having the same word repeated in the output. And also, this is the repetition penalty, and then the frequency penalty that also tries to look for words that are not very infrequent or very rare, okay? So the distribution actually is not normal. Have you switched off or tuned these parameters in your evaluation?
No, we have not tried. We also have not tried to manipulate temperature or other things like that. We just use them in a very simple way. And it's also because, okay, we had to produce a real world system, so.
Yeah, but this is going against, your own interest. If you think that it's better in your simplification guidelines to repeat a word than to use a more complex one or synonyms or whatever, then the system is playing just the opposite. So I suggest you to have a look to that. Yeah, it's not that difficult to change. Also the temperature, you can also tune the temperature for having this. And then the last question, I don't know this metric, SARI metric. More or less, this 47 and something results, how can we taste what it means? So it would be half of the task, or?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. I've spent some of the last days on doing error analysis, and actually I was looking at our output, and I also looked a little bit at the at the output of participating systems for the shared tasks. And for example, our best runs, they had a pretty similar SARI score. And I have to really recognize that when I saw the system winner, their output was a lot better in some respects. And it didn't show up in any of the automatic metrics. So the metrics they are problematic in themselves. We do not have better ones at the moment. For English, there are some better ones. For Spanish, and there is nothing. For Italian, there is nothing better. For Catalan, yeah, even less.
And for the shared task, if may I ask, do you have an idea of the amount of data they have used for fine-tuning or for?
I think all of them, they just used LMN prompting. I just looked at one of them, one of the participants, and they did an agentive workflow. But I mean, it's still just writing a prompt, 3 different prompts for 3 different.
I see.
And it performed them in sequence. So I don't know if. Because we are just writing the paper, and I haven't looked at the other papers which were, from the participants. So I don't know if there was some fine-tuning attempt. But that's mostly what you get when you do a shared task nowadays. Like most people will try something with prompting because it's for a shared task. It's something you can do very quickly and usually get pretty good results. Often people use ChatGPT because it gets.
Yeah, but probably but probably the results are maybe better for Spanish, where there might be more data sets than for Catalan. Maybe a cross-lingual comparison would also reveal, no? But they have been. Okay. But okay, thank you very much for the answer. Very clear. Thank you.
Molt bé, doncs si n'hi ha més preguntes, em sembla que no n'hi ha més, acabarem aquí. Moltes gràcies.